Okay, so welcome once again. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ward, the Executive Director of the Los Altos History Museum, and it is my pleasure to welcome everyone to our program, Making Time for Your Art. And I'm so excited that we're having this opportunity to gather this morning. I want to begin by acknowledging that the Los Altos History Museum is on the native homeland of the Muwekma Ohlone, on whose native territory of Thamien we exist. And the Muwekma have cared for this land for generations before the arrival of Europeans, and we are grateful to our Muwekma hosts. I also thought that was a very appropriate way to begin today's conversation because in so many native cultures and in so many cultures around the world, art is really part of your daily life. It's part of your daily practice. And so many people in a culture would be participating in art, from making their own clothing, putting beads on their clothing, decorating their own homes. But in our modern society, we have professionalized and institutionalized art. We have made art this separate thing that only some people can do who have specialized training. And, it just really made me think as an anthropologist. It made me realize so many other cultures for so many millennia have made art part of daily practice, including the Muwekma Ohlone. So I think today's land acknowledgement also ties into our theme of making time for art. And I'm really excited that the museum is having an opportunity to talk about how can we reintegrate that art practice that is an ability, a human ability. And I'm just very grateful to Doreen Cohen, who is the long-term museum volunteer and member. Doreen is here. And Doreen has helped me really appreciate the importance of art for our community, and especially her work with the Senior Center has been so inspirational for me, and I'm so delighted by that. And Doreen also invited Denise Howard to come here today, and she's just a magnificent presenter and tech whiz and everything else. So the two of you together are a dynamic duo, and we are really excited that you had put together this program for us. We're looking forward to hearing from both of you. And I know those that are there in the gallery can also see some of your handiwork on display. So thank you both very much for presenting this morning. And I'm going to hand it over to Denise. And I'm going to disappear, but I'll be here in the background for everybody on Zoom. If you have a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat function. And towards the end, I'll read out those questions to Denise. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a good talk.
All right, let me see if this works. First, let's think about who are we, who's our target audience for this? Who is this for? And we have in mind people that are maybe they're still working full time, like I am, that have an art itch they need to do something with. Maybe you're a stay-at-home parent that you've got an art itch, but you've got kids to take care of and soccer practices to go to, things like that. You don't know how you can possibly fit art into your schedule. Maybe you're a new empty nester. The kids have just grown, they've gotten out of college or whatever, and they're on their own. So you've got your schedule and your time back to yourself. Maybe you're a new retiree that you've been waiting your whole life to have time to do something other than work. And now you're like, okay, so now what am I going to do? I kind of got an art itch. Maybe I should do that, but where do I get started with that? People that want to create, but they don't know where to start. It's like, I don't know what medium I'm interested in. I don't know what my style is. How do I even I don't know if I can even draw. How do I get started with that? Or anybody at all who wants to figure out how to fit art making into not just their schedule, but maybe even their daily life. So that's kind of who we have in mind for this. So just as kind of a background, my own background, I've met a lot of people that say very artistic in their youth, maybe when they were kids, maybe all through school, everything, but then they quit when they started their career or their family. They got married and there just wasn't any time left for that. And when they tell me this, I mean, you can tell, yes, of course, those responsibilities need to come first, but they dream about finding that time to create again. They've just got that itch, and that wish bubbles up whenever they see an artist at work. And I also met people who believe that they don't have any art ability. They're like, oh, I can't draw a straight line. Well, guess what? There aren't really any straight lines in art. So that's okay. they think they have no art ability, but they've never really tried since they were in third grade or whatever. They just kind of put the art supplies aside and say, that's just not for me. I can't do it. And then I've met, I can tell these people have a creative itch, or they wouldn't have even said that to me. They told me that. So, and I've met people that are newly retired. They're finally ready to start to try art, but they don't know quite how to start, to figure out what media clicks with them. And so it's really a shame that so much creativity and desire for creativity out there lies dormant, undiscovered, expressed for so long, are happening in not just our own personal lives, but the lives of the people around us, the communities that we live in. And this actually happened to me too. I drew constantly as a child. I took every art class offered at my high school, and I started earning spending money by doing pencil portraits by commission when I was only a junior in high school. And I wanted nothing more than to be an artist. And I majored in art in college, but at my parents' urging, I also majored in math and computer science, because you got to be able to earn a living. They're like, oh, how do you think you're going to make a living at that? And fortunately, I did well at both. I figured probably sooner or later the math would get too hard or something, but it didn't. I finished with both degrees, a BA and a BS. And then I had to make a choice. It had to be one or the other. And so I was terrified of being a starving artist, because that is a real thing. That's not just a stereotype. There are a lot of people who can barely make rent or put food in their mouths because they're driven to just do art. And I didn't want to be one of those people. So I went the computer route, and I've been a software engineer now for 39 years nonstop. And I eventually moved out here to Silicon Valley, where it's even more consuming. You know, everything's a minimum of 50-hour weeks. And I've worked places where it was 80 to 90-hour weeks, where you barely had time to do your laundry, you know, let alone have a social life or anything else. So there certainly wasn't any time for art in all that. There just was no time or energy. And so this went on for about 25 years for me. And during that time, I felt so guilty about not ever picking up a pencil. I felt so guilty about it that if I happened to walk down a street and there was an art supply store, I would cross the street and go the other way, because I was like, I just felt so bad about the, I knew if I went in, I would really feel guilty, and I didn't want that for myself. And I'd feel compelled to buy art supplies that I knew I'd never use because I didn't have time. So that's how bad it was for me. And like I said, this went on for like 25 years. And I had the idea that I needed large blocks of time, like a minimum of 3 hours, 3 days a week, to actually do anything. So it just wasn't even worth trying. And you know what? I was wrong. It doesn't take that much. So finally, about 11 years ago, in 2010, I found myself in a tech company here in Silicon Valley that had reasonable time commitment expectations. Imagine that, here in Silicon Valley. It was a rare thing. And so the urge to return to my art swelled up again in a bigger way, because my art side said, hey, you've got time now. So in college, I had gained competence in several media, because I'd taken all kinds of classes, you know, printmaking and watercolor and oil painting and just about anything you could think of. But I knew that since I still wasn't going to be doing it full time, I kind of needed to narrow down what I was going to be doing. So I decided to focus on just one or two media. And so I chose my first love, graphite drawing, because pencil's the first thing we pick up when we're little kids, right? And also colored pencil, because with colored pencil, well, with both of them, really, there's no mess, there's no cleanup, there's no toxicity, there's no waiting for something to dry or hurrying to finish before it dries, anything like that. And with colored pencil, you get all the control of pencil with all the color of paint. So my first drawings, again, getting back to it, were a little rusty. You know, you haven't been, as one of my instructors in college said, as long as you're not drawing, you're not getting any worse, but you're not getting any better either. So, but I kept at it, and pretty quickly it came back to me. It's like riding a bicycle. It's a skill. So I soon learned, and a couple of months after that, of an organization called the Colored Pencil Society of America. And I laughed, like, really? There's even an organization for that? But sure, why not? There are there are national and international organizations for pretty much every other medium you can think of. There's the Watercolor Society of America, there's the Pastel Society of America, and so forth. So why not? So I joined it, and it turned out there's a local chapter around here. I joined them, and just as you can either think of this as a coincidence or a sign that was the very year that the National Convention and the International Exhibition of the Colored Pencil Society of America were right here in the Bay Area. So, and it hasn't been back here since, but it was here that year. So I went and I saw how much higher of a bar they were at than where I was. So I had some work to do. So I decided if I was going to take myself seriously regarding my art and not make it a hobby, I needed to set goals and work to fulfill them. I really decided it was important for me to not consider it a hobby. Now, this is not to say everybody should do this, but this was my journey, that I needed to be serious about it and not call it a hobby. I was going to call it my other career, and I still consider it that way. So I figured at that time, like I said, this was back in 2010. I thought that maybe in 15 years' time, I might be able to earn signature status in the CPSA, which requires you need to get into their international exhibition 3 times within 10 years to get that signature designation. I might be able to win a significant award of some kind. I might be able to get one of my drawings published in an art book. I might be able to get gallery representation. So my long-term goals were to develop a body of work and lay all the groundwork so that I could eventually leave high tech behind and become a full-time artist, not by taking the giant leap, but at that point, it would just be a little step, just a regular step. So to that end, to all those ends, I joined colored pencil groups on Facebook. I registered a domain name, denisejhowardart.com. I built a website. I started a blog. I printed business cards. I entered a few local art shows, and I started winning awards. And I found myself the president of our CPSA chapter, our local chapter, despite not having any previous leadership experience because nobody else wanted the job. And I had to figure out how to bring it back to life, and I did. And within 5 years, not 15 years like I thought it would be, within 5 years, I accomplished all of those goals that I mentioned that I'd set, which I thought would take 15. So while still working full-time as a software engineer. So it can be done. So since then, I've achieved 10-year merit status with CPSA, meaning my work has been in 10 of their international exhibitions. I'm also a signature member in the United Kingdom Colored Pencil Society, exhibited in the United Kingdom. In fact, there's a show going, their international exhibition is going on there right now in London. I have a piece in there. It cost me a fortune to send the artwork over there, but it's there. I've won international awards. I've written several tutorials. I've written the book, 101 Textures in Colored Pencil. I've given demos for a major art materials manufacturer. I've taught workshops across the United States, and now I'm on the Colored Pencil Society of America, CPSA National Board as the communications director. So, and I'm still working full time, and it's only been 11 years to accomplish all that. So, and I have gallery representation too. There's a gallery in Monterey that has my work for sale. So, and I'm finally planning that, don't tell my boss yet, he doesn't know this yet, but I'm planning that final step to full-time artist within the next year. So this is all to tell you that I've learned a few nuggets along the way that I want to share with you, and hopefully it'll help you find ways to put art making into your life too, and discover whatever will satisfy your creative itch. Your medium probably won't be like mine, your style won't be like mine, but it'll work for you. And that's the important thing. And you don't have to consider it a career. You can consider it a hobby. You can call it whatever you want. You're the art maker, you get to decide. So let me show you how my evolution has happened from little kid to today. age 6.5. That was the look out the kitchen window in the farmhouse that I grew up in back in Northeast Missouri. And I look back at this now, I'm like, wow, I really paid attention to the details that were going on. I had the highway that goes past, that's looking east, so it's in the morning. You could see the highway that went over the hill. You could see the neighbor's house down the road, the barn. Apparently the day I drew this, there were a couple of stray dogs off in the pasture, and that caught my attention. So I drew the two dogs. You can see the end of the slide for the swing set that we had right here, and the maple tree. And that was the big tree that was on. Now looking back, I realized the actions aren't quite there, but I was thinking about it. 1974, age 13, I think this was my first colored pencil drawing ever. And I entered it in a little local, our hometown was like 2,000 people. So it wasn't very big, but they had a little art contest for kids. And lo and behold, I won first place with it right off the bat, my very first thing I ever entered. And I don't know what my reference was for that. It was probably something out of a magazine. But my husband, when we were back visiting a couple of years ago, digging around in the old house, and I came across this, and I was just going to throw it away. But my husband snatched it away from me. He says, "Oh, no, you're not. You're not throwing that away." And I mean, to me, he went and had it framed, and so it's on the wall at our house at home now. Gotcha. Had a few bottom 1977. Starsky and Hutch was a big thing. I was a big Starsky and Hutch fan, and we were poor, so I couldn't afford to buy magazines and posters and stuff like that. So what I did was I buy one magazine that had a good picture in it, take it home, get a piece of paper, and draw it. And so my art teacher was so pleased with this. She hung it in the Commons lobby for the whole school to see. And it was right after that I really started getting commissions to start drawing local people in the area, because they wanted to give those to their friends or family for Christmas presents or whatever. And this was like 16 by 20, this graphite drawing. The one on the right, I know you can't see the bottom of the slide there either. 5 years later, age 20, I was in college, and this was a pastel drawing. And it ended up winning an award in college. I was still learning how to use pastels, but I was especially pleased with how well that Vaseline jar color came out. I don't even remember what colors I used, but it ended up looking just like Vaseline. And then, so like I say, after college, big gap in time. So, you can't see the date on this one either. The one on the left, 2010, age 49. So this was, I think, the second drawing that I did after getting back to my art. So it was small, it was only like 7 by 9 inches, but it's colored pencil because I decided colored pencil was what I was going to use. And on the right, 2020, age 60. So I've come a long way. All right. So you might be thinking, so now you're getting into the crux of it all. How do you find time to work on your art? And you know what? If you've got time for social media, TV, you've got time to do art. Because how many people spend more than 1 hour a day on Facebook or watching TV? Yeah. So, and which is not to say that social media is something to not have in your life. It's just that you're probably spending more time doing that in TV than you really intend to. So that's time, all that is time that you could be doing your art. So with that in mind, one idea for you is to make a regular appointment for you and your art and stick to it. Don't just put it on your calendar and then when the little alert comes up, say, okay, never mind. No, it's time to put the computer aside, turn off the TV or whatever, go do it. Another thing you can do is carry a little sketchbook of some kind with you, with either pencils or maybe a brush and watercolors and gouache, or a little cup of water, something like that. And that can come in handy for, like, if you're a parent and you're taking your kids to soccer practice or whatever, and it's just practice, it's not the game or whatever. So you're sitting aside or whatever. Well, maybe not for the kids, but suppose your husband's in spending an hour in Home Depot, and you don't want to be in there. So you say, I'll just sit here in the car and start drawing people that you see walking by, or draw vehicles, or draw reflections, or draw interesting textures that you see on the buildings, or leaves on the ground. There's always things in when you start looking, there's all kinds of things that can inspire creativity. And remember, everything doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It's just things to keep that creative spark going and satisfy the need to make something. Another idea for you is, you might say, well, I have so many different media. Where do I even start? Just pick one, stick with that one medium for a few weeks. At the end of that, pick something else and stick with it for a few weeks. And then that way you don't feel like you're scattered all over the place and have analysis paralysis about what should I be doing? Just pick one. That doesn't matter which one. Pick one, stick with it for a little while before you move on to something else. Oh, and by the way, on the idea of making a regular appointment for your art, that could be anything from an hour a day, every day after dinner. It could be twice a week for 2 hours. Could be every Sunday afternoon. You get to decide, because it's your art. Set small, doable goals, like an eye every day, or 5 sketches a week. That was one thing that my high school art teacher did. They really made my art skills level, or what, because the idea was it was the continuity, the constant practice of it that would make you better. And it didn't matter what it was of. It could be, a hammer laying on a bench, or it could be a flower, something out of a magazine. As long as you were drawing and you turned in 5 sketches a week, that was good. And it really did make a difference. Another goal might be, if you're painting, just paint small and paint 1 painting a week, something like that. You could set a goal like having something ready to enter by a particular local show's entry deadline, to have something to enter for that. So there's all kinds of ways to set those small, doable goals. And remember, we're in the tech age that we live in. You've always got a camera on you. You've got a smartphone, you got a camera. So it's not like in the old days where you either had to lug a big camera around with you, or find pictures already taken somewhere to work from. And it's a good habit to get into. Just always be looking wherever you go for something that might be interesting to paint or draw. Or maybe it's just a pretty scene. Doesn't matter. Use that camera. That's what it's for. And finally, I mean, if you really want to spend more time at it, it's possible to ask your employer about a 4-day work week. That was a revelation to me several years ago. In fact, it was about 2009 or 2010. I caught back up with a friend that I didn't even realize was particularly artistic, but he was about the same age as me. We went to grad school together. He was working for a tech company here in Silicon Valley. And I was like, oh, how you doing? What have you been up to? And he said, oh, I'm only working 4-day work weeks now, and Fridays are my art day. And I was like, head blown, you can do that? And I did it for a while myself at the employer I was at the time. It was wonderful, just wonderful. It's like to have a whole day that, laundry and errands and things aren't allowed to creep into. You get that day from your employer, and that's art day, to do anything you want that's related to your art practice. It was wonderful. Not all employers will allow something like that. It's entirely up to your boss and their management and everything, but it's worth looking into. The worst they can say is no. So these are some ideas about how to make time for your art. So then once you've got the time, it's still going to be a limited, finite resource, right? So how do you save time to maximize the amount of time that you have available for that? So one big suggestion, I can't emphasize this enough, is organize a little workspace somewhere with your materials ready. A lot of people, they'll start out just by working at the kitchen table. I've got an hour before dinner, get everything all set up on the kitchen table. They do their thing, and then they have to clean it all up afterward to make room for dinner. And if you've got a small place that it's reasonable, that's what you need to do. But even better is to have a dedicated space somewhere, even if it's just a little corner in the spare bedroom, something like that, someplace where you can set up a little either easel or a drawing table, something like that, and have your art supplies handy, so that all you have to do is come in, sit down, and start working. Instead of needing to spend 15 minutes getting all your materials collected together and getting set up, and then sit down and go, okay, now what do? I've only got 45 minutes until I have to clean up again, and then have to spend another 15 minutes at the end putting everything back away. And because it's all about inertia, right? If you know it's going to take me 15 minutes, 20 minutes just to get set up before I can even start to do anything, you're going to be a lot less likely to put the energy into doing that. Whereas if everything's already sitting there ready to go, and you just need to sit down and do it, it's so much more easy to just do it. So even if the workspace is kitchen table, maybe you have a little rolling cart or a little desk of some kind, corner of the room, extra bedroom. If you have any unused space in the house that's reasonably comfortable, anything at all like that where you can set up, it's just wonderful. Another idea is to make swatch charts. Now, this is primarily for people who draw, but it could be useful for people who work with pastels or watercolors or paints too. Because you've got stick pastels, or you've got tubes of paint or whatever, and the color on the outside of the tube isn't necessarily what that paint looks like once it's out on a surface and dry. So you make a swatch chart of all the colors that you have and have them available. It's so much easier to look and pick the color you need, instead of having to, in the case of colored pencil, make a little scribble on paper and go, no, that's not the color I want. Put that pencil back, pick up a different one. That might be the right one. No, that's not the right color either. And have to do that over and over. That really eats up a lot of time over the course of doing an artwork. So if instead you've got that swatch chart in front of you, this is, I haven't switched to the next slide yet. There's the problem. There, now you can see. So this is what I do. This is what happens if you don't have swatch charts. You're spending all this time scribbling, trying to find the right green. Well, no, it's not that green. No, it's not that green. No, it's not that green. No, it's not that one. Or yellows. It's kind of hard to see here, but all these different yellows, trying to find the right one. Whereas if instead I made a swatch chart, I've got my pencils labeled. So like here, I've got number 44 is violet. And if I'm looking for the right blue or the right violet, I can just look at my swatch chart and go, there's the one I want. It's closest to that number 44. So then I go pick up my number 44 pencil, and away I go. Saves a lot of time over the course of doing a drawing. And it can for pastels or watercolors or so forth too. So more ways to save time once you've carved out that little bit of time. Buy yourself a meter stick, one of those long metal, that's basically a long metal ruler with a little cork backing on it. For so many years, I thought, oh, what's the big deal? I've got a foot-long ruler. It's just a matter of moving the foot-long ruler along the way. Well, what happens is it won't quite line up right or whatever, and you're spending time moving the ruler, drawing everything. Just buy yourself the meter stick. It makes life so much easier. Similarly, buy a cutting mat and a utility knife. For a long time, I was always looking for some surface that I could put under what I needed to cut. And they make these cutting mats and they last for years and years and years. Just get one, for crying out loud. If you need to, if you're going to be cutting stuff from time to time. For me, it's a matter of I'm always cutting sheets of paper to size or cutting mat board to size, things like that. That's where it comes in so handy. And even like if you're making cards from scratch from cardstock, and so you're needing to cut cards, buy the meter stick and buy the cutting mat and a good utility knife. if you work with pencils of any kind, whether it's graphite pencils or particularly colored pencils, because colored pencils need sharpening a lot, often and a lot, buy an electric pencil sharpener. Now, this is one of those things when I got back to my art, when I was back in college, I never even knew there was such, I don't know if there was such a thing as an electric pencil sharpener back then. But when I got back to my art with colored pencil, I remember when I first saw mention of electric pencil sharpener, I laughed out loud. I thought, really? How hard is it to sharpen a pencil? Why do we need an electric pencil sharpener? But you know what? It saves a lot of time. Instead of doing this, you just go zip, and it's sharp. And you add all those sharpenings up over a period of working on a drawing that may take a week or two to finish, it really makes a difference. And finally, buy the best materials you can afford. Don't start with what's known as student grade stuff. Like if you see, speaking of colored pencils, if you see a set of 120 colored pencils for sale for $20, they're not going to be any good. Trust me. That works out to like 17 cents a pencil. And if it's only costing, and they're still making a profit on that. So they're probably using dyes rather than pigments, and they're using a lot of fillers. So they're not going to be very saturating color. They're not going to blend very well. And you're going to try them. And you're going to be like, why does anybody use this medium? This is terrible. Well, the materials really make a difference. That goes for papers, it goes for canvases, it goes for paints, it goes for just about any medium. This doesn't mean that you need to go out and buy the most expensive brand, but just don't buy the cheapest brand, because they're probably going to be really disappointing, and they'll actually hold you back on your own creative development, because you're going to spend so much time struggling trying to make it do something that it just won't do, because it wasn't made for that. So that's why I showed boy, these really don't fit on there very well, do they? Stonehenge paper is one of my favorites to work on with colored pencil, but there's lots of other surfaces and papers that work well with it too. But
pencils.
Regular pencils?
No, I mean, I'm talking about colored pencil. But you said they don't think the high end.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recommend?
If I ran and I can talk to you afterwards if you want to get names of some of those brands. So, but like I say, if it's a set of 120 advertised for $20, that's not one of them. any pencil is probably going to cost you a minimum of $1.50 to $2 at minimum $1.50 to $2 per pencil for colored pencils if you're buying them open stock. And that's not for that's not for expensive pencils. That's just for decent ones. So when you think about making art for yourself, you might have a specific idea of what art making is, that it's specifically painting, the act of painting right then, or the act of drawing, or the act of framing something. But as one of my college professors, she said something one day, and it really stuck with me. She said, arting as a verb is a lot more than that. Arting is all kinds of things. It could just be staring out a window, thinking about what you might like to draw next. That's time spent on your art, on your creative process. There are so many things that arting is, and I've listed a whole bunch of them here. There's just so much more to creating than standing in front of an easel with a brush. And don't let anyone make you feel bad about spending time doing any of the rest of these things. It's all has to do with creative process. You could be watching a demo on YouTube, a tutorial on YouTube. And it's like, well, that's kind of social media because it's YouTube, but no, you're sitting there learning something that you're planning to put to work in your own practice. You might be go to an art reception. Happen to know of one coming up in Palo Alto in the next couple days, or did it already happen? I can't remember. Anyway, going to an art reception where you're hobnobbing with fellow artists that are also on their art journeys, and you can find out where they're at and what medium they work with and what struggles they're having, and learn things from them. Maybe they're further along, so they have nuggets to share. anytime you have a conversation like that, that's arting. So don't feel bad if you're doing things other than standing at an easel painting. There's more than that. And then finally, I wanted to share with you some resources for, well, suppose you're at a place where you're like, well, I know I want to create, but I haven't figured out what medium I like. I don't know what style is, or how do I improve? Can I do that if I can't find if I live away from where there are classes offered or something like that? Well, these days, there's all kinds of resources. Of course, YouTube is awesome for looking up demos and all kinds of things. And this is not to say that all the demos and tutorials you see on YouTube are good. I've seen some really bad ones out there. But word gets around, and especially if you get on there's almost certainly a group on Facebook. And I know I said if you're spending time on social media, you could be doing this, but Facebook has its purposes too. There are groups on Facebook for just about any medium you can think of. I know of at least 7 related just to colored pencil, for example. So it's a good place to go and find out. Pretty soon you figure out who the more experienced, more talented, more skilled people are for a particular medium in the group. And typically they're very, very forthcoming and willing to share that information that they've learned about how to, what materials to buy or how to approach a particular texture or you name it. So there are still magazines in the world that are even printed. They're not all online yet these days, like Artist Magazine, Plein Air Magazine, Pastel Journal, International Artists, etc. There are still books being printed. I don't know, you'd think that people think that because I'm a software engineer, I must do art digitally and do everything digitally. It's like, no, I spend more than enough time on a computer as it is. The last thing I want to do is spend even more time sitting at a computer. So I still like actual printed books and printed magazines that I can clip articles out of and things like that. So classes and workshops, of course, there's quite a few offered here in the Bay Area. We're very fortunate to live in the Bay Area where there's kinds of just about has art club, Cupertino, Milpitas, I think San Mateo, Palo Alto. Yes.
I can recommend the Community School of Music and Art. We have
Mountain View
classes, musician, if you're in art, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And it's a rate schedule too. So if you don't have any money, you can get.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay as much as if you're really rich.
Yeah. For those of you online, she was suggesting the what's the specific name? Community School for Music and Art, which is in Mountain View.
Yeah.
And that's they have a full slate of all kinds of classes and workshops and everything for both art and music as well. So yeah. And then if you're wealthy, you could have private instruction. There are a lot of local artists who teach kids, for example, if the parents are so inclined and they see a bent towards art in their kids, they'll hire. In fact, I've been approached from time to time when I'm exhibiting someplace that people will come up to me and say, do you teach kids art classes? I mean, like private instruction? And I always have to turn them down because I don't have that kind of time yet in my schedule. But it shows that there are plenty of people around who are willing to take on private instruction too, if you're so inclined. And that might be appropriate if you already know what medium you want and you know that artist is good at that medium, so you can latch onto them and learn specifically from them. And then finally, like I said earlier, there are national organizations, like in my case, the Colored Pencil Society of America, that they have local chapters, and they'll host workshops there that you can take. And of course, these days, I think pretty much every workshop these days, ever since the pandemic, is done by Zoom. So it's great because you don't even need to be in the same time zone with where the instructor is anymore. And it works out great. And typically it's set up so that at all times you can see what the instructor is doing, as well as seeing their face, and can ask questions. And it's like you're looking over their shoulder the whole time. So finally, other tips I have for you are, like, as I mentioned earlier, I can't emphasize this enough. That's why it's on here again. Buy the best material you can afford. The last thing you want to do is waste time fighting poor quality materials to try to get them to do something they don't want to do. When you're learning, don't be afraid to leave your comfort zone, because when you're uncomfortable, that's when you're learning the most. And it's great if you do get to the point where you are comfortable. You're like, yes, I know exactly how to approach this, exactly which colors to mix, how to get it on the surface and everything to get the result I want. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to keep learning more, you sooner or later, you got to leave that comfort zone and to get past that, especially if you take on an entirely different medium where you feel like a bumbling idiot all over again. And you have to work your way through that. It's all good. Keep your old work and your old sketchbooks, because when you're in the process of getting better and improving and learning and finding out about new media, you can't see at the time what progress you're making. It's only by looking back at something you did 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago, and you go, wow, I didn't realize how much better I'd gotten. But now looking back at that, it's obvious. And that's very affirming. It's like, yes, I'm getting this. It's working for me. So I can't emphasize that enough either. And if a project doesn't work out, it's not a failure as long as you learn something. You know, you might get to the point you're completely frustrated. You drew a big X across it and you just wanted to throw it away. But as long as you picked something up while you were working on that to say, yeah, there's something that I did that I won't ever do that, make that mistake again. Well, great. There's what you learn, is not to do that, make that mistake again. Protect your work in progress from children and pets. Here's something I think we all learned the hard way. In my case, it was a project, I guess it was about 10 years ago. I decided to do a pastel piece of some kind. I had it laying on a surface. Well, we had a new kitten in the house, and she walked across it one day when I wasn't keeping up with her. And so there were pastel prints all over the table and the floor, and she ruined the drawing and everything. So ever since then, I now have a sheet of foam board that's about a 1/2 inch thick, and it's got little risers on it. And whenever I'm away from my drawing board for more than 30 seconds, that foam board goes over my drawing board, so that will never happen again. And it has never happened again, even with multiple cats in the house. So, and that's going to happen with kids too. In fact, I just saw an article a couple of days ago about this woman. She's an artist, and she's a professional artist, and she's got a whole dedicated studio with a door that shuts and everything. And she had a commissioned painting in progress that she was going to be charging like $4,000 for, something like that. It was a big deal. Well, she and her husband hosted a party at the house, and kids were going to be there. And so she put a sign on the door that said no entry, and she told people with their kids, said, make sure nobody, they don't go in there. Well, guess what? Her sister painting, she's asked her sister to pay for the painting because she's going to have to do it all over again. So anyway, so if she'd have just locked the studio door to protect it from kids, she might have been, I don't know why she didn't lock the door. Anyway, that's an example. So there you've got 2 examples why I protect from pets and small children. Photoshop or Elements or something like that, or other image manipulation software. I tell you, I took a 2-part course in Photoshop about 8 years ago through one of the local community colleges. And it was some of the best money I ever spent. Oh my gosh, because that means I can use it to, when I take pictures, I import them in my computer. And then if the exposure wasn't quite right, I can adjust that, crop it, do all kinds of manipulation and say, okay, now there's the reference photos that I want to work from, instead of being doomed to have this poorly exposed photo that was the best I could get at the time. And it also comes in handy when you get ready to start exhibiting your work and you want to enter something into a show. Well, they always require that it's no bigger than like 5 megabytes and at 200 DPI or something like that. And if once you've taken something like a Photoshop class or Elements class, you know exactly what that means, and you can do it in 30 seconds or less, and off it goes, instead of being like, well, I don't know how to do this. So, and because you don't want that to hold you back from starting to maybe enter your work in local shows. So, and finally, perhaps the most important thing of all, play. Allow yourself time to just play. You don't always have to be working on your art. You don't always have to be learning something. Sometimes it's good to just play. You know, get out some, you know, buy some acrylic, what's it called? Alcohol inks or something, and get your blow dryer and blow it around on paper and see what happens or whatever. This is something that kids were really good at when they were learning to work with art materials, that we got that trained out of us as we grew up about, oh, well, the play is just for children. No, it's not. Play is part of the creative process. And if it makes you feel creative and it loosens you up to start working on your regular artwork that you're doing, then that's wonderful. That's exactly what it's good for. It's rejuvenating. It can help get it out of a rut. It can, if you're on the verge of burnout, it's like a mental vacation from everything else you've got going on in your life. So one last thing I wanted to share with you is I've not, no, I guess that's it. That's never mind. Forget I said that. And so finally, that's, why is it not going down? That's interesting. It's not going to the next slide. Well, that's it anyway. The last slide just has my my website on it and my email address, but I've got business cards over there on the table if you like, where you can. And I think we've got time at the end after Doreen to take some questions. So that's it. That's all I have to share with you for today. I hope that helps. So. Oh, it's not escaping either. What the heck's going on? Let me stop sharing. And then maybe it'll come. There we go. Okay. I'm going to get here to set up for Green. Okay,
Can we do a little stand up break?
Oh,
For
sure.
a minute?
This is a good time to do it, actually, too, as we get set up ready for Doreen to give her presentation for you.
Not long though, because we do have time limit.
Yeah, maybe a couple minutes, just a couple minutes.
What do I just-
So you go down to go forward
Okay.
and up to go back. And that's really all there is to it. But I'll stand right here in case you.
Okay, wonderful. While we get set up for
Yeah, let's-
Doreen,
Start.
there she is.
Wait, I don't see me.
Yeah, you won't see you.
All right. Does anybody else see
They'll
me?
see.
There's a little. okay.
Everybody
that
can
little
see you
light
on
right there.
Zoom. Everybody can see you on Zoom. Doreen, say hi. And do you also have slides?
Hi.
Do you also have slides, Doreen, for us? to
I
see?
see Denise has my first slide up here.
Oh, here, hold on. I know what's going on. I have to do this first.
There we go.
After I get through, you're gonna hang around and that would be the time to take some time to look at the artwork. But right now, let's get back on schedule because the Zoom session is limited. So we want to finish that part and then we'll have time for everything else. So Elizabeth, are we ready?
We are ready. Yeah, Denise,
Okay.
or it still says Denise Hayward underneath, but we know that this is Doreen Cohen who is speaking to us now. Doreen, thank you for being there. Do you want to take your mask totally off from around your neck? There we
Okay.
go.
I'll put it
Oh, I'm in your seat, huh?
Okay, I'm not used to being without that mask. Actually, I found that it's kind of a good thing, you know. You have it around here, takes 20 years off. Silver orbit, similar journey, something that more than one person found useful. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk a little bit about. I first came across the poem, A Thing of Beauty is a Joy Forever, when I was a 20-year-old co-ed in college. I think I had a huge crush on John Keats. But I've always remembered that line from his poem. And we're going to visit it again at the end. But I want you to kind of have that to set the tone. So why are we here today? Well, we've talked already a little bit about that, but basically it's an interest in art. It's for how many of you would you say reconnecting would be something you're interested in right now? Or take a new turn? Is that something? Or start something absolutely new? So this is what Denise and I have both had a journey in that direction. We're just going to share that with you. Let me see, I've got to get used to using, this is her computer, so I'm all bumble fingers with it, but she's right here if I get stuck. Okay, so once you kind of decided to do something, it's a lot like finding it. All of a sudden you see things that become relevant because you've made that decision that that's something that you want to do. So we want to find time now that we've decided that this is something we want to do. We want to find inspiration and we want to find help. And I think Denise told you her journey for all of those things. Different words, different journey, but similar ideas. For my own, let's see if that's what's up there. Okay, for my own journey. Well, I don't go back to age 6. None of that survived. But I do go back to the 8th grade yearbook, and everybody was invited to submit a drawing for the 8th grade yearbook. And I was greatly surprised that mine wasn't. And so we were the Elizabeth Cobb Junior High School Cubs, and our yearbook was the Cubs' tail. And so as everybody says these days, do you get what I did here? The tail. Okay. So 8th grade humor at its best. And then in college, I didn't minor or do a double major in art, but I had to take an art class as part of to check that box for the basic studies that we were all required to take certain classes in certain areas. So I took Art 101. And it was the fall session. So right around October, we were asked to do a piece of art that had 1 of one thing, 2 of something else, and 3 of the third. And so that was my design, and I got an A in the class. But never once did I think, you know, maybe I should take more art classes. No, I was just checking the box, get through the basic studies and get onto something that would get me a real paying job when I got through with it. And then, of course, graduate from college, work a few years, get married, have kids. And now once the children are coming along, there's less time to just dedicate yourself maybe to an art project. But for me, it was finding the art in the things that I was already doing with my children. I brought this quilt, so it's over here, and you can take a closer look later. So my son was about 2 or 3 years old. We had been to Yosemite several times. So this whole quilt is little scenes from his memories of going to Yosemite. And I think what's important to notice about this, yes, it's a quilt, but mostly it's about the scenes. And those are not quilted. Those are done with fabric. And that is the precursor to what I learned to enjoy much later. And then I even incorporated it in my working years. The last 7 years, I was out at NASA Ames for 22 years as a project manager for contracts. And we had one the last track I was on vacation and video, photo, tech transfer. And so I wanted to do, everybody who's ever worked for the government knows you've got to do that monthly technical report, which is most of the time that's a real snoozer. But I wanted to do something that was in keeping with the visual communication. And so we came up with a template for all of us to use in PowerPoint. And so that was a lot more fun for us to put together. And the hope is that it was a lot more fun for our NASA customers to review every month, because that was their obligation, as they had to review that report. So I even found a way to find the art at work on a government contract. So finding the time, and a lot of finding the time, as Denise has already mentioned, is making it easy to go to, when you do have a few minutes, you don't want to spend that whole time getting set up. Well, I don't have a beautiful dedicated art space like Denise showed you that she has. So what I learned to do was take advantage of portable things. Now, when I was at work, we had the online calendar, but after I retired, I actually went back to the paper planner because I could do it in pencil and I could take it with me, and it fits in my purse. And I actually write things down there like laundry and drawing and knitting. So it helps me to have that structure in my day, especially being retired. So take what you already use, and use that. So how do you keep track of everything else in your day? So add the art to that. And then I also find that clipboards, for what I do, which is drawing, it's nice to have the clipboard because you can put the part on the left under the clip is the actual page that I'm doing the drawing on. And the part on the right under the rubber band is where I have the image that I took with my iPhone of the thing draw. I was talking about, I do them right on that piece of paper just to double check the color and choose and write the number of the pencil next to it so I can go back to that same one each time. So the point of that is that it helps me save time, because I'm not floundering around looking for something, and I can just put that whole thing away when I'm not using it. And then the other one is the plastic storage bins that come in every size. And I like the clear ones because if I do need to put everything away, like getting ready for Thanksgiving dinner or something like that, can all go just in one plastic bin. I can see exactly what's in there. And then I can find it again, get it back out, and it's all right there. I don't have to go find the pencils here and the papers there and something else is somewhere else. So it depends on what you're working on. I also do fabric art, and that's a great way to store everything that I need for the one project. So finding inspiration. When I retired, I took classes in absolutely everything, including the Community School of Music and Arts, having taken my sons there for piano lessons years before that. But I took ceramics, and I took drawing, and I took a couple other things. Went out to De Anza and took a one-day class. And I didn't save this, I wish I had, but I came away from that watercolor class with a levitating banana. And why didn't I save that? I don't know. But joining groups like the Color Pencil Society, that's where I met Denise, and I actually took one of her classes. Publications, I have a couple of things out here on the table, such as Artist Magazine, and that's where you find announcements about other things. So one thing leads to another once you get started down that path. And I have all the, this is going to be posted on the History Museum's website. So you'll be able to go and pull this up and see this listed there. But mostly I got there just like all of you get anywhere online, is you just Google it And it's amazing the things that come up. And yes, I've done YouTube, I've done groups and found out about workshops and all of that way. And so I want you to think back to this quilt now. Scenes, but my focus back to art in later years. I went to FABMO, and that's where I found out about a bunch of other things. FABMO is, they have these exhibitions and you go and see what all these different people have done with different types of fabrics and other media. And so I really liked that idea. And then I took a class at Beverly's, which I'm not even sure is still there, but on laying out a scene using fabric. And so this is the first thing that I did after taking that class. And what was the real aha moment for me is in the class, we had done one that was vertical. And I was trying to do a beach scene in Florida. And everything in Florida is horizontal. And so that was like a real breakthrough when I realized that this needed to be horizontal. And so when I changed it to the other direction, it came together. So I was able to use fabric to as representational of the water and the sand and the sky. And then I started adding stitchery and ribbon and things like that to add the detail. And so this is kind of an evolution of how I've done that. And the other thing that I figured out is that I wanted to do the stitchery and the ribbon embroidery. And I needed a way to do that. And you can't put an embroidery hoop on something like this. So I discovered that I could use needlepoint canvas and stitch my basic background to that. And so it would be something that was firm that I could hold in my hand, and yet I could pull a needle through it. And so so in other words, take an idea and make it your own. That was just something that, because I also did needlepoint and had the canvas right there, it's like it came to me that way. So for my art, it's my memories, the beach in Florida, my garden, much like Monet. If you've been to Giverny, you know that Monet's garden wasn't really all that big. He just did lots of paintings of the same garden. So that's the two in the middle. And then my surroundings. The one on the right is actually my view of the apricot orchard right out here from Jazzercise. So I like to be over by that window looking out on it. And so that's what that is a depiction of. So it's all, and I took the picture. And so these are just, I'm not going to talk about each one, but I just want to show you some examples of different things that, like Denise was saying, play around and try something new. And so these are all colored pencil. Those are my grandchildren in my garden. And that first one on the upper left is the very first project that I did. And one of the things that I've been most fortunate to have is a friend and mentor who happens to be an artist and art teacher. And we were able to do the communication on this by email. So there are different ways to approach things. So it's been wonderful to have a mentor to actually take an interest in your art. And the fact that this mentor is also a friend makes it especially nice, because I got a lot of support and help and guidance for years since about 2016, which is when we reconnected at a college reunion event. I think you met somebody at a I'd reconnected with somebody. So and these are just some more examples of with pictures across the top. I moved into my new condo March of 2020, the week that the quarantine went into effect. And I was lucky enough that they finished moving me, but they just deposited me there with piles of boxes in every room. But anyway, so I wasn't getting out and seeing a lot of people. I was doing the quarantine like all of you, and everything was online, but I did have visitors. So I took all the pictures that I used for my reference photographs. These are all on my back fence, on my new condo right there. And so that's the world that I had. And so this is what I did during the COVID. And then the ink dots on the bottom, this is an example of somebody just came to one of our Art Ventures group sessions a few years ago with the idea to do ink dots, and we all brought some pens and we tried it in class, and I think I did a flower or something like that. But I just enjoyed that, and it was a lot of fun. It was just like playing. And so I decided to try it with, well, I don't have mine here, but I did the black cat in ink dots, which was our cat. And I liked the way that turned out. So I've done these others, and actually Sam and Fran Grinnells are in the audience, and this is her daughter's cat, and that was their other cat, Chia. So this is where I broke my own little rule about taking my own photographs, because they sent me a favorite picture of their pet, and I used that for my reference photograph. But normally I would not use a picture that somebody else took, because then it's not my art. And challenging yourself. So I was challenged to go bigger. And my idea of going bigger means I graduated to a 9x12. I had been really small. So this is what came out of that challenge. And then doing something a little different, or seeing the art in what you're already doing. So I want, and I have examples of these over here too. Doing the Christmas stockings was a family tradition, and my mother made all the stockings for my sons. So I saw that as my grandparents' role to do them for my grandchildren. And so the first one I did, I got a kit. And a kit means that it comes with everything in it, right? It's got the yarn, it's got the instructions, it's got the canvas, got the backing, everything was in the kit. And I really liked that. But by the time the second grandchild came along, I couldn't find a kit that I liked, but I found a pattern. Okay, so the pattern means that you've got it's printed on a canvas, but now you've got to go down to the knit shop and get yarn and everything else that you need to complete that, buy the fabric for the backing. And that one turned out just fine too. The third grandchild came along, and I was well into back to the colored pencil and the fabric art and all of that. And I just felt like, well, I wanted to do something that was specific to the child. So hers is the one on the right with the little Madeline doll, because her name is Madeline and we call her Maddie. So now I'm not satisfied with the other two, right? So I went back and I actually made new stockings for the other two grandchildren that had something specific to them, like the little blue and the little pink. I wanted to include my daughter-in-law, and I wanted to do something different for her. So I used ribbon. I used the needle point at the top and the bottom of the ribbon in the middle. And so this is up here just to show you to look for things that you're already doing. You can find the art in that, just in even making the Christmas stockings. And so for me, it's important, talking about copyright issues and things like that. If you do have a piece of art that you want to enter into an exhibition, they will often tell you that it has to be your original. And even the photograph that you used as a reference photograph needs to be your photograph and not somebody else's. So I don't want to spend any time at all on something that's not mine. And so for me, that was important. And then when I did decide to enter something once in a while. I didn't have to worry about copyright issues because it was my photograph and it was my art. And finding help. These are just a few of the many, many places that I have found art over the years, art help. And it's just a variety. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you see, and this is just my experience. Denise could come up with another list equally long with a totally different list. And it's because we both get out there and get ideas from exhibits that we go visit, the magazines that we look at, the websites and things like that. So this is here just to encourage you to do all of that for yourself. And it's kind of fun because you get led down a path. And so I wanted to conclude. I think we've, whatever your reason for being here today, I hope that you've gotten some ideas on finding time, finding inspiration, and finding help. And we'll be around afterwards if you have other things that you wanted to ask about. I have two friends that I invited to come and be here today as further examples of people who have found the art in their lives. And first up here is Claire Noonan, who found that she turned her attention to writing books. So her art is writing. And you can talk to.
That when I was teaching school, though, I would have lots of art things, visual art things for kids to do.
So you can come up and talk to Claire afterwards if you're interested in how she got where she did in publishing. And then my friend Reynolds back there. And it was actually retired, able to wearing Fran Grenell's designs. So if you're interested in jewelry as an art form, then I invite you to chat with her. And what I wanted to do in closing is to revisit. In the poem is called Endymion by John Keats. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. And I've asked our president of the Los Altos History Museum Board, Gary Hedden, to come up and read the poem. He may not read it all. I hope you can stick with it, but if you feel like it's too long, that's fine. So this is Gary Hedden from the History Museum.
Thank you, Doreen. Maybe first, do a little stretch, or also Elizabeth, are there questions that came in on the chat?
We're going to do that.
Actually, you know what, Gary, we've just had some very nice people saying how inspirational this has been, and so far I haven't had any questions on chat. So go ahead and just the poem, I think maybe we'll
wrap it up with that.
Route it out very nicely.
Okay. Well, thank you.
It's up there.
It's up there. Yeah, I don't have to read it. You can read it for yourself. But this is wonderful, by the way. I love your art. I don't know if I'm both inspired and intimidated. You're too good.
Everybody starts somewhere.
You do. In fact, Denise, I was an artist in grade school. We all were, weren't we? We had projects. And I probably should admit it to this group, but I actually like paint by numbers. Hey, you got to start somewhere. My painting, I still am a painter, and it's a little more practical. See that color over there? That's Thai teal, and I painted that wall. I think it turned out great. Thank you. So as far as Endymion goes, this comes to us from the story of Endymion, comes to us from Greek mythology. And he was a beautiful young man, a simple shepherd, actually. And at one point, the goddess of the moon kind of fell for him. And so every night, as she crossed the night sky, she would look down and view him. And I guess this appealed to John Keats. He liked that story. He liked the thought of beauty. And in his case, this beautiful young man. I think for us this morning with this group, it's more about the beauty of art. Endymion by John Keats. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. Therefore, on every morrow, are we wreathing a flowery band to bind us to the earth, spite of despondence of the inhuman dearth of noble natures, of the gloomy days, of all the unhealthy and o'er-darkened ways made for our searching? Yes, in spite of all, some shape of beauty moves away the pall from our dark spirits, such the sun, the moon, trees old and young, sprouting, a shady boon for simple sheep. And such are daffodils with the green world they live in, and clear rills that for themselves a cooling covert make against the hot season. The mid-forest brake, rich with a sprinkling of fair musk rose blooms, and such too is the grandeur of the dooms we have imagined for the mighty dead. All lovely tales that we have heard or read, an endless fountain of immortal drink, pouring unto us from the heavens brink. So Keats, at the time he wrote this in 1817, it was published in 1818, is actually in ill health. And so part of this is him thinking about quiet breathing was important for him. He died 3 years later. So thank you, audience, both in person and virtual. I don't know how many are virtual out there, but thank you for joining us. Thank you, Denise and Doreen, for your presentations, and Elizabeth for being our host from far, far away down in Southern California. It's actually worked out pretty well, I think.
Yeah. And thank you, Gary, for that beautiful reading of that poem. Thank you, Doreen, for suggesting that. And Gary, that was just, I think it couldn't have heard it better from the president or past president of Greentown. You really brought the nature of that poem to life, too. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, my pleasure.
So
we'll wrap it up now. We do have some events coming up. There's Art Los Altos will have a talk with Maddie McBurney, and November 4th at 7 p.m. right here. I guess, is that another one that's going to be Zoom hybrid?
That one will be all Zoom. That one's
all Zoom.
And I guess I would just also say, of course, this is in support of our Annie Knapp Fits exhibition, and the exhibition is on view through February 6th, I believe, or 7th of next year. And of course, Annie was definitely a self-taught artist herself, and she made lots of time for art in her life. So this was a great program to honor the memory of Annie Knapp Fits. Thank you, Doreen and Doreen and Denise. There we go. Thank you both.
We both answered to either one.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap it up now, but do spend a little time looking around. There's some treats out there, some food. You had a question in the back?
Yeah, 50% of the men here had a question.
Yeah, there are 17 people in this audience, and 2 of us are men. Yes, sir.
Actually, it's curious with the technical aspect of color pencil, particularly the color fastness compared to other media, like acrylic or, some colors are, we just fast.
And Gary, can you repeat the question?
So the questions hold up.
The question was for certainly for other media, light fastness is something that's been worked out over time. And what about colored pencils? And of course, by light fastness, what that refers to is the tendency to fade or change color over time, and over how much time. So with colored pencil, there are, it's funny you should mention that, because the Colored Pencil Society of America is the one organization that does its own independent testing of all the brands of colored pencils out there. And through they use the blue wool test, if you know what that is. It's a standard mode of testing for pigments, and has determined across for a given brand of pencil, which colors in the set hold their color longer, are more light fast, and which ones are less light fast. And it's graded to a scale. And just about every brand there is out there, they have some that are quite light fast and others that are terrible. And there's two exceptions to that. There are two brands where every pencil in the brand is completely light fast. The first one is Carandash Luminance 6901, and they call it Luminance 6901 because 6901 is the ASTM. It's ASTM 6901 was the light fastness standard that was developed for colored pencils. And so there are now 100 pencils in that set, and every one of them is completely light fast. The other one that is completely light fast is it's called Derwent. It's made by Derwent, and they're called Derwent Light Fast. And there are 100 pencils in that set as well, and every pencil in that set is completely light fast. Any other set out there will have some that are more light fast and some that are less light fast.
What does that mean? Does that mean 10 years, 100 years, 50 years?
It means, if I remember correctly, it means 100 years under museum conditions. So in other words, you still don't want to like put it in direct sunlight. You don't want to do that with any kind of artwork anyway, whether it's pastels or oil paints or anything. You never want to put it in direct sunlight. But yeah, you can expect that in normal conditions like this, it lasts at least 100 years.
Well, that's important.
Yes, it is. Well, in fact, this was an important thing that the CPSA did was to get that light fastness standard developed and call attention to all the art materials manufacturers out there to do something about their lack of light fastness, because as you might guess, if your medium isn't light fast, who's going to take it seriously? Because it's not going to be around for generations to see. And so CPSA has done something about that by making sure that happens. And like I say, now there's 2 brands out there that are completely light fast.